The new podcast, In the Shadow of Princeton, starts as the matriarch of a prominent Princeton family is found stabbed to death in her locked basement. Investigators look from a serial attacker to her family to Princeton University students. One hot-blooded investigator sees a conspiracy. Is he way off base, or does privilege let you get away with murder? In the Shadow of Princeton is available wherever you get podcasts, or you can binge it ad-free by joining Wondery Plus in the Wondery app, Apple Podcasts, or Spotify.
It's the Jersey Blitz, NJ.com's high school football podcast. Welcome, everybody, to episode 8. I'm Dan Long, and we'll be breaking down all of the brackets in the South and Central throughout the Garden State as we're getting started for the beginning of the postseason this weekend. Joining me here today to break down everything in the South and the Central is going to be Kevin Minnick, Bill Evans, and Joe Zedalis. And we'll take a look first at the South Group 5 bracket. And Joe Zedalis, can anyone beat Toms River North, the two-time reigning champs in Group 5? They've been dominant through the last couple of seasons. And do they have what it takes to then make it a three-peat?
Well, you use the word dominant, and let me just put that into perspective a little bit, Dan. They have the longest winning streak in the state, 14 games in a row. They have 34 consecutive victories against public school opponents, and they have not allowed a touchdown in their last 17 quarters. So can anybody beat them? Yes, I think they probably are a little bit vulnerable to a team that can control the ball. Their closest game this season, a 3-point win over Point Pleasant Borough. That's exactly what Point Borough did. They controlled the football. At one point early in the game, Point Borough had run 23 plays to 1 for Toms River North. So if they're going to encounter someone from the South who can put together long drives and play keep away, they might be a little bit vulnerable. But, I mean, the way they're playing defense right now, I think they're going to be incredibly, incredibly hard to beat, Dan.
Bill Evans, can Rancocas Valley be that giant slayer? We've seen them do that to a couple of top 20 teams during the regular season. Do they have what it takes to put a scare into Toms River North?
Rancocas Valley, to me, is arguably the second best team in the whole bracket. And by that, I mean, if you go onto the other side where, Washington Township and Atlantic City are the top two teams in the Central, RV beat Washington Township. And just because, AC was in between the two of them, on the power rankings, they didn't jump. I'm sure RV is probably believing they should be the one seed on that side of the bracket and having obviously a much better chance to win the sectional title. They're not the type of team that Joe just explained. They're a little more explosive, big play. They have one of the better receivers in the state in Brody Dieter. They have a very athletic and electric quarterback in Savian Adams. I question the defense a little bit, although it's been very good lately. They did shut out Washington Township, but they have had some teams that have run on them. So I think if they were to get into a game with Toms River North, I think it would be a little bit of a shootout. I might not favor them, but I think that they have enough athletes and enough offense to make Toms River North nervous.
Shifting over to Central Group 5, and Kevin Minnick, we bring you on here to the show for the first time. There's going to be a rematch brewing between Atlantic City and Eastern awaiting us in the opening round.
Yeah, Dan, if you look at the brackets, there's not a ton of games in here where there are rematches, but here's one that, when these two teams played several weeks ago, it turned out to be like a shootout, and AC wins the game 35-27. The quarterback for Atlantic City, Peaky Roseboro, has just been getting better and better each week. He threw for 393 yards and 4 touchdowns in that game. And, here's a kid who has really emerged as a major dual threat quarterback for Atlantic City, and one that, at this point is capable of putting that team on his back and carrying it pretty far. They have a balanced offense. They have athletes on both sides of the ball. So, it's tough to beat a team twice in the same season, especially in football, where obviously Eastern Eastern is going to go back and look at the tape and see what they did wrong and try to make those corrections. But, Eastern's going to challenge with Logan Dawson. Now, he's a baseball player who's going to Boston College, but he's been a terrific quarterback for Eastern as well. So, like I said, Eastern's going to check, they'll check the tape, see what they can do. But right now, I'd have to give the edge to Atlantic City to make it a daily double, so to speak, because Peaky Roseboro has been that good.
Joe Zedalis in this Central Group 5 bracket, a very interesting matchup at 4 versus 5. Southern taking on Cherry Hill East.
Until last weekend, Dan, I was a little bit concerned about Southern. They had lost 3 of 4, stopped scoring points. They only had 28 points in their last 4 games. But last week they came back strong. They scored a 41-12 dominating type victory over Brick Township, a team they should have dominated. So I think Southern maybe put a Band-Aid on to stop the bleeding a little bit. Look, this is a team that's had a good season. Granted, they were no match for Brick Memorial or Towns River North, but they had played solidly through every game. They're a team that grinds things out. They throw the ball a little bit, but they have to have success running the football to set up that passing game. And on defense, they protect field position and try not to put their offense into bad situations. Now, Cherry Hill is having a phenomenal season. Southern's going to have to play great against their running back just to have a chance in this game. But I think it'll be interesting for a while, and I think Southern just wants to have a chance to win in the fourth quarter.
Shifting now over to South Group 4, and one of the top teams in the state resides there as the top overall seed in Winslow. Kevin Minnick, does anyone have enough power to touch Winslow, let alone beat them in that section?
Dan, we've talked about Winslow all season, and they have performed on a weekly basis tremendously. They've been nothing but consistent the entire season. Is there a team that can touch them? We're talking high school football. We're talking high school kids. And from time to time, things develop because they're kids and a team loses a game that probably it shouldn't. But in looking at the way this bracket is laid out and the way Winslow has played this year, the way they've responded to the big games that they've been in, I don't think there's a team that touches them. I think they're just too explosive offensively. Jalen Parker, the sophomore quarterback's thrown for almost 2,000 yards and 28 touchdowns already. They've got 4 or 5 different receivers that would be the number 1 receiver on any team they went to. And the run game, while they have been dominating through the air, the run game is pretty good. They've done a nice job, in mixing things up a little bit. They've got, running the football, 18 rushing touchdowns. So they're solid offensively. And I really think that the defense is probably the part of the team that doesn't get enough credit. Everyone loves watching teams score points and, putting the ball in the end zone. But this defense has been phenomenal. They've allowed only 58 points this season in 9 games. So if you do the math, that's pretty darn good. Like I said, I think a team may be able to stay with them in the first half. And I think that's not going to come until the sectional final. But when push comes to shove, Bill Belton knows how to step on the gas, and this team has responded, time and time again. So I anything less than a sectional title is a major disappointment at this point. When we get to the state semifinal, if they get there, that's another story for another day. But right now, I don't think anybody touches them.
Now, Joe, there's a team that you've been talking about all season long here on the Jersey Blitz that you believe can have a legitimate shot at Winslow.
Well, Middletown North wants their shot. They're off to a 7-0 start. They won their first outright division title in 41 years. This is a team that is big up front. They have a dynamic little, and I mean little, 5'1", 150-pound running back named Shane Vellante, who gets in behind and disappears behind this big offensive line. And, Middletown North has a head coach who's been on the staff of the Miami Dolphins and Syracuse University, and he knows offense. He knows how to develop a passing game. Can Middletown North play with Winslow for a whole game? I don't know, but Middletown North plays physical up front. They do try to run the ball. They have a exciting pass game that takes shots down the field. I mean, Middletown North has dominated every one they play this year. So I don't think they're looking at themselves as true underdogs here. I think that they do want their shot, and we'll see what they can do.
Looking now at the bracket for Central Group 4, Bill Evans, Millville slipped up last week against St. Augustine. Did they learn any lessons in that matchup that'll help them out in trying to get back to a sectional championship and play deeper in the postseason?
Well, I think, offensively, and, talking to Bert Ayala, their coach, after the game, he thought they did enough offensively. They lost that game 27-21. He thought, they could have been better offensively, but that they had scored enough. But, it's kind of funny when you talk about, Latsier Brooks having 5 catches for 120 yards and maybe needing to touch the ball more. But, he had those 5 catches. He had 1 rush. This is a kid that's been a big game player for his entire career. I really think they need to feed him the ball, and whether that's just little quick outs, throw him a screen in the flat, and if he can make one move and then just go the distance. I think that they really need to target him 10 or 12 times, get him the ball more. Defensively, I was a little surprised that they gave up 190 yards to Julian Turney. They've been a really good defense. I think that's an area where I'm sure they're going to be focused in this week leading up into the postseason on being able to stop the run. And just because I don't think there's going to be a team in this group, that's going to be able to score with them. So I think those would be the 2 things: is just tighten up a little bit defensively. Make sure that you can stop the run, force the opponents, in the second and third and longs, and just get Latsier Brooks the ball a little more, because we know in the postseason, really any time, but definitely in the postseason, he's a kid that can take over a game.
And Joe, there's another dangerous team lurking from the Shore Conference in Central Group 4 at the 2 seat. That's Brick Memorial, and you think they can be someone that Millville is going to have to pay attention to?
Well, I do. I know Bill just said that he doesn't think there's anybody can score with Millville. I would dispute that and say, Brick Memorial has been one of the more powerful offenses in the Shore Conference. The only problem they had is they're in the same division with Point Pleasant Borough and Toms River North. They have a junior quarterback named Jason Lajara, who got most of his football playing experience playing on the national flag football team. And what that taught him is how to think on his feet, how to react quickly, how to get the ball out of his hand. He knows when to run, when not to run. He's got 10 yards passing. He's also their leading rusher with 608 yards. But they have 2 other kids. They have a senior, Kevin Andrews, who's been hurt a little bit, but he's a 2,000-yard career rusher. And then they've gotten some mileage recently out of Nazir Whitaker, who had been a wide receiver. And he's a flashy, really quick feet kind of kid. And he's had 409 yards. I think Brick Memorial is going to score. And if they can get the running game going and throw when they want to, as opposed to when they have to, I really think they can play with anybody, including Millville.
Looking now at the bracket at South Group 3, there's a familiar name that was a state champion in Group 4 a season ago, Kevin Minnick. In Mainland, they're the number 2 seed in this bracket, but you believe that with their schedule and that tough schedule, that they're ready to roll here in the postseason.
Yeah, Dan, coming out of the WJFL American, arguably it was the best division that this league has had in its history. Defending champions, defending sectional champions, teams that are traditionally the powers of South Jersey football. They lost 3 games. They lost to Millville, they lost a tough one to St. Augustine, and they lost to Winslow. I think those 3 games right there, even though they're losses, a coach generally will say, well, maybe we don't take anything positive out of a loss. I think maybe you kind of have to. You have to get some lessons learned learn a little bit more about your team when you face defeat. And I think this Mainland team has done that. They've played some other tough teams. They played a Delsea team last week who, we've talked about, Delsea being, they're the defending Group 3 state champion, but went through a bunch of changes and things were not really going well for Delsea until the last couple of weeks. And they've they look like a dangerous team in Group 3. But a tough, hard-earned win against them is going to go a long way too. So I think Mainland, with the schedule that they've played, starting out with Atlantic City, a win over Atlantic City at the Battle at the Beach that now looks even better considering where Atlantic City is at. They whitewashed Cherokee, a traditional South Jersey power, and they've knocked off two teams in Ocean City and Egg Harbor Township, that are respectable. So I think that they've done what they've had to do, and I think they're going to be prepared now to make a run. They got some kids on this team who have tasted victory in a championship setting. Quarterback John Franchini, he's thrown for over 1,500 yards. He set the career touchdown mark at Mainland last week, breaking Brett Caprio's mark. They've got a running back in Rocco DiBiaso who picks up tough, hard to gain yards. And the wide receiver in Jake Bloom has really come out of, I don't want to know if he's necessarily come out of nowhere, but I don't think people really talk about Jake Bloom and know how good he really is. So, they've got experience. While they did lose a ton of kids off that championship team last year that went 14-0, they did bring back enough kids that know how what it takes to win when championship football is on the line. So I think Mainland has put themselves in a position to make a run, and obviously we'll see what happens. But those 3 losses during the year, while no team likes to lose, I think will benefit them starting this week.
So that battle-tested 2 seed in Mainland may have a matchup down the road with the number 3 seed in Holmdel. And Joe, you've been impressed by them this season, and could that lead to some fireworks in a semifinal?
Well, I think the game on Saturday night is going to tell us a lot about Holmdel in the state tournament. They have one of the finest dual threat quarterbacks in New Jersey in a young man named Jack Cannon. He can do it all. He can run it. He can throw it. He can game manage. Holmdel 7-1. Only loss was to St. John Vianney, 33-19. I guess it proved in that case that Cannon was human. But what this kid has done in every single game has been nothing short of phenomenal. He's got 1,690 yards passing. He's got 860 yards rushing. And that's with teams knowing he's going to get the ball on every play. The only issue I have with Holmdel right now is defense. They haven't been able to stop a whole lot of people. I mean, they've won games 38-32, 56-31. Their most recent win was hard-earned, 27-21 over Manalapan. I think Holmdel can do some damage in the tournament if they can get some other players involved, because I would think in the playoffs that most teams are going to take a chance and try and make someone else beat them. But, so far, Cannon has not been stopped, and I think he's going to be a player people would enjoy seeing in the state tournament, Dan.
Looking now at the bracket for Central Group 3, and Bill Evans, you've talked about this team for the last couple of episodes and how dangerous they can be come postseason time if they get into the playoffs. Well, the Delsea Crusaders, the defending Group 3 champs, they certainly got in, and they've earned a 7 seed. In your mind, are they the most dangerous 7 seed in all of the postseason?
Yeah, 100%. And as you said, I mean, this is a different team than it was 2 weeks ago, when they decided to make the change back to the wing T that they've run for the last few years, including last year when they won the state championship. Former head coach Sal Marquez coming back and taking a more prominent role calling the plays. Jonathan Harris, who's a very good two-way player who made a season debut 2 weeks ago. They beat a one-win Williamstown team a few weeks ago and looked real good doing it. I thought last week was going to be the test when they played Mainland, and they lost that game in overtime and had to lead late. And so I think that showed that this is a team that can go on a little run here, even as a 7 seed. They play Burlington Township in the first round. Burlington Township was a team that, a year ago only had a couple wins and is, kind of taking a big jump this year, but certainly doesn't have the playoff pedigree that a lot of these Delsea players do. And I think Delsea is probably the most dangerous 7 seed in the tournament.
Joe, in this same bracket for Central Group 3, can Allentown also leave a mark on the section with a first-round upset?
I don't think Allentown's going to make a deep run, but I do feel like they have a chance in the quarterfinals against Ocean City. Allentown is number 8 in the entire WJFL in scoring offense. Allentown has scored 278 points, and they could easily have 8 wins. In the 2 losses, they scored 20 points against 7-2 Brick Memorial and 31 points versus 6-3 Notre Dame. They lost those 2 games 23-20 and 28-21. The fewest points Allentown has scored in a game all year was 13, and that was in a 45-13 loss to undefeated Hopewell Valley. They have a quarterback, Matthew Schweitzer, who's connected on 60% of his passes and thrown for 1,813 yards and 11 touchdowns. He's also the team's leading rusher with 712 yards and 19 carries. Now, I know Ocean City has been very solid on defense. My only question about Allentown here has to do with their schedule. Bill and Kevin, I think, would agree with me that the Mercer County portion of the West Jersey Football League is anything but overpowering or great. It's average or below average. And Ocean City has played a really good schedule, but I just think Allentown's going to go down there with nothing to lose. And I think they have the potential on offense to put some points on the board. Let's just see if they can play a little defense, Dan.
Bill, in South Group 2, looking at the bracket, there's an interesting rematch that's on the horizon in that bracket between West Deptford and Manchester Township that you noticed from earlier on this season. How can that change potentially in this second time around?
Yeah, this was the very first game of the season. It kicked off the Battle of the Beach, 10 a.m. on Thursday of Labor Day weekend. You know, it was the first kickoff of the year throughout the state, and it was really one of the better games of that weekend. Manchester took a lead in that game behind their quarterback Aiden Lund, who was running all over the place. He suffered an ankle injury right before the half. Stayed in the game but couldn't really run. West Deptford came back and really probably should have won the game. You know, they had a lead in the fourth quarter. They had a deep shot with a wide open receiver that they didn't hit, and then couldn't convert a 4th and short. And then Lund led them down the field with his arm and ended up winning the game. And West Deptford, that was the first game under John Emmel, who took over the program this year. They've had a couple really crushing losses, 30-28 to Haddonfield in a game that they outplayed Haddonfield, lost in overtime to Paulsboro. So they've been on the cusp of having a really good year, and it's just been a matter of finishing games. And I think they have a chance to go there. I think they're probably a better team than they were back then, and possibly winning that game. But if Lund is healthy for the entire game at this time, it could be tricky. But again, it was a really good game the first time, and I think it's going to be a really good game again.
When looking now at the Central Group 2 bracket, Joe Zedalis, are we in store for a collision course of 2 teams from the Shore Conference in top-seeded Rumson-Fair taking on Wall?
I have no doubt in my mind that Rumson will be one of the teams in the final. Wall, I'm not so sure. I think Dan, that Rumson has been to the last 2 Group 2 finals, lost them both, but this program is a playoff monster. Since 2013, they have 10 seasons where they have won at least 2 playoff games. So since 2013, their record in the playoff is 29-6. And I think this Rumson team is one on a mission. I'm calling 2024 a redemption tour for Rumson. They've proved a lot of people wrong. They proved they can play solid defense. They proved they could run the football. You were at the game when they beat Red Bank Catholic 26-11, and then a 5-game losing streak to RBC. And the thing that came out of that game was some of the Rumson players said there were people around their town who thought it wasn't even a rivalry anymore. Well, Rumson has proved that wrong. This is a team that is really strong. They have 4 seniors on a big and strong offensive line. They have they've averaged 111 yards rushing, and their quarterback, Ono Toole, is just playing at an ungodly level. I mean, he's seeing the field well. They have two good wide receivers. I don't think there's any question that they're going to get out of this bracket, and we'll see what happens to that. Now, Wall is a little different team. Wall is under steady Eddie Guerreri. Eddie Guerreri never had a losing season at Manalapan in 13 years there. Wall is playing Eddie Guerreri type football. They're running the ball. They're playing physical, bend but don't break defense. I mean, Eddie Guerreri, Wall may even be a little bit ahead of schedule. Eddie Guerreri came in 2023 after the horrible hazing scandal that rocked the Wall program. They went 4-7 last year, and now they've only lost once this year, and that was to Holmdel. They have a running back by committee kind of offense. They've gotten a lot out of their first-year starter at quarterback, Frankie Scarmolino, who's thrown for 792. The one thing, Wall is not as unbeatable as Rumson is, or as I feel as unbeatable as Rumson is. But I can tell you this, Wall is not going to go quietly against anybody, Dan.
Now we're taking a look at our final two brackets in Group 1. First, for South Group 1, Kevin, is there huge expectations for Glassboro, who's the top seed in that bracket? What do you believe everyone feels is going to be the expectation for this Glassboro side?
Dan, the expectation is a championship, or it's a huge, huge disappointment. This Glassboro team was extremely young last year, made it to the state final, had some bumps in the road getting there, but put everything together in tournament time, got to the state final, lost to Mountain Lakes. They brought back just about everybody, and expectations were through the roof. This team is going to win a Group 1 state championship. So if they don't win, then they're going to be looking at each other and wondering how things went wrong. They have Division I talent all over the field. They've got 4 or 5 kids already with significant Division I offers. And most Group 1 schools are lucky if they have one every couple of years. They've posted a ton of shutouts. The defense has only allowed 39 points all season. Defense has been phenomenal. They shut out Pennsgrove, they shut out Salem, they shut out Woodbury, they shut out Deptford. They played very well last week in handing Woodstown their first loss of the season, a team that I think they will end up playing again in the state semifinal. Offensively, they have a former All-State running back in Kenny Smith, who has only played, I believe, 6 games, maybe even 5, because of the transfer from Hamilton. They've got the Saab brothers, who, by the time everything is said and done, will be able to choose any college they want to go to in the country. And they've got a defensive lineman in Brandon Simmons, who was an all-state player as a sophomore last year, who he's in the backfield before you know it. So everything that they've been doing this year, while teams and coaches like to say, well, we take it one game at a time. And Timmy Breaker did say that after the Woodstown game. Well, everything's even now. We're just going to take it one game at a time. Okay, you can take it one game at a time, but if this team doesn't win a championship, something's really wrong. And that's no disrespect to the rest of the teams in Group 1, because I'm sure there are some talented teams out there that will give all they can. But this Glassboro team has just been loaded. And if they don't get it done, I don't know what they're going to be doing. It's got way too much talent. This is a Group 1 team that I think can compete against a Group 4 team. If they had 1 week to prepare for, they could play with pretty much any Group 4, Group 5 team around. Now, can they play with a Group 4 or 5 team during the course of the season? No, I think it would catch up to them. But in a one-game scenario, I think they are that good. So it all starts for them on Friday. This is what the expectation is, and we'll see if they step up and deliver. I have a real good idea. My feeling is that they will take care of business and, get back to Rutgers and, right what went wrong for them last year.
In that same bracket of South Group 1, Bill, you're looking at an interesting opener in Haddon Township taking on Riverside.
Yeah, both these teams are not your traditional powers, and that's kind of what makes this interesting. Haddon Township is in the playoffs for the first time in 2009 since 2019. Riverside made the playoffs last year for the first time in a couple of years, but has never won a playoff game. Both of these teams have had really good years. Haddon Township has found a way to pull out some games late. It's put them in position to host a playoff game, which I think is going to be a pretty big deal for them. I expect a very close, very competitive, probably low scoring game between these two teams. The winner gets Glassboro, so you know, maybe the winner doesn't really get a really big prize here. But at the same time, I think whoever wins is going to be it's going to be tremendous, for either program to come out of this year with a playoff win, which might not have been expected coming into the season.
And now taking a look at the last bracket to preview with Central Group 1 and Josie. Shore Regional with a new head coach, new offense. They are dangerous as the number 2 seed in this bracket.
They really are. And they open up against New Egypt, the team they played on October 4th and won 32-0. With no disrespect intended to New Egypt, I don't think they can make enough tweaks to make up 32 points. And as you mentioned, they have a new coach, Don Klein, who was at Ocean for 17 years and won 93 games there. Came back to his alma mater and got rid of the wing tee that Mark Constantino ran for 32 seasons and rode to 210, victories and 10 division championships and 4 sectional titles. He plays a wide open passing game, multiple wide receiver sets. The same thing he used at Ocean. It was the offense that Kenny Pickett, now the backup quarterback for the Philadelphia Eagles, found early success with and helped him get to Pitt and into the Heisman Trophy conversation in the NFL. But what Klein has been able to do is most Group 1 schools don't have the depth or the talent to be able to, cover 4 and 5 wide receiver sets. And it's been highly effective. I mean, in 8 games in the Klein's tenure, the Shore Regional single game passing mark, which stood for years, was gone. So they have a downhill running game. When they do run the ball, they have 2 hard running backs. In Brendan O'Brien and Cole Torres. And the thing they do in this offense, Dan, is they spread the ball around in the passing game. They'll take a deep shot once in a while, but they're a team that takes advantage of soft coverage and picks up yards after carry. I think Shore, coming out of the bottom of this bracket, has a chance to get to the final. What they might do against Woodstown, the presumptive favorite, I'm not sure, but they would get either Middlesex or Woodbury in the second in the semifinals. And Shore and Middlesex have had some wars over the years back during the Central Jersey days. But I think Shore is a team that's going to make its presence felt in Group 1 this year.
Now, Bill, you're going to say not so fast, my friend. You're thinking that Woodbury, the number 6 seed in that bottom part of the Central Group 1 bracket, could make a run from their spot.
Yeah, this is a Woodbury program that 2 years ago won the state's first Group 1 state title. Last year got back to a sectional final and lost to Woodstown. This has been a rebuilding year for them. A lot of the players from those 2 teams, not all of them, but a lot of them are gone. They have some very good seniors, though. Marquise Taylor, a wide receiver, is one of the better wide receivers in South Jersey. Just Juan Solomon, moved from defensive line to linebacker, is a tremendous defensive player and also runs it on offense, and lines up in a wide receiver and has made some big plays there as well. Those 2 guys have kind of kept Woodbury afloat. I mean, you look at a 3-5 record, but the 5 losses. They lost to Haddonfield, Woodstown, Glassboro, Willingboro, and Shalwick. All those games were close except the Glassboro loss. They could have easily had a few more 4 wins, and all those teams they lost to were playoff teams, and in most cases high seeds. So I mean, they're battle tested, and I think when you look at the South Jersey Group 1 teams over the years, they typically are. And I just think, you look at Middlesex last year, lost their first playoff game to Burlington City 60-15. They haven't had a lot of postseason success. Same thing with Shore. They came down to Woodbury a few years ago and lost 43-8. I think a lot of times when these South Jersey teams meet up with a team out of the area, they tend to do well because they've seen it all year, and they've been battle tested. So I think Woodbury does have a chance as a number 6 seed to really kind of pull a couple upsets from seed wise, possibly make a run and maybe even get to that final.
Well, thank you very much, guys. We're now all battle tested after you got us ready going through every one of the brackets in the South and Central groups 1 through 5, as we have the playoff on the horizon here for all these teams who have their thoughts and dreams on bringing home sectional championships and advancing deeper on into the state and hopefully finals in their respective groups. We remind fans that you'll be able to listen to our complete breakdown of all of the brackets for the North 1 and Group 2 sections. That's going to be coming out here on the Jersey Blitz on Thursday. So I'd like to thank Kevin Minnick, Bill Evans, Joe Zedalis for joining me here today, our exceptional engineer, Brian Dekine, and I'm Dan Long saying so long and thanks for tuning in to this playoff edition of the Jersey Blitz, NJ.com's high school football podcast.